What's going on, guys? Pete Nova here with Player Profiler. I'm joined with Chuck Bass, and today we are going to do our risers and fallers. We're going to do post-draft risers and fallers, and we're just specifically talking veterans. We did rookies last week. We'll do veterans this week. Chuck, what's going on, man?
Feeling good. A lot of my guys made it through the draft unscathed. Rookies found a lot of great landing spots, so I'm ready to talk about the unlucky bastards that didn't make it in this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be winners and losers, right? And I think I was a little surprised. I thought there'd be a lot more losers for veteran running backs,
Yeah.
but a lot of them actually ended up doing okay. And a lot of the rookie running backs that found favorable landing spots did not have an extremely established veteran in front of them. But let's get to the first player here. It's going to be Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. 25 years old, and right now he's RB 14, 62nd overall, and he currently is a riser. He's up 3 spots since the NFL draft, and or at least before the NFL draft. And right now he's going late 5th, early 6th round. Some guys drafted around him are Kyron Williams, James Cook, and Caleb Johnson, new guy to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Chuck, what are your thoughts on Chase Brown, and is he rising in your rankings post-draft?
He definitely is, because this is one of the few guys that can actually be a roster changer. You know, you have teams like the Cowboys, right? Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, they're not going to change the outlook of your dynasty team. But if you have someone in there like Brown, he's set up for a monster season, maybe even a monster couple seasons as a bell cow in a top 5 offense. They bring P. Ryan and Moss back, but those are depth pieces. This is the Brown Show, make no mistake, brought to you by Skyline Chili. There was some trepidation early on last year, but once Zach Moss went down, I mean, he took off from week 4 on. He had 20.2 touches a game, which was 6th in the league, up there with your Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara types, 9 RB1 finishes in 13 games, including 5 in the top 5. And their Bengals approach to offense this year was basically, hey, let's run it back. And, you know, their offensive line may be a little maligned for being able to protect Joe Burrow, but did pretty well for Chase Brown. So I love him this year. Big riser for old Chucky Bass.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, Chase Brown, I was a little surprised, right? I thought that the team was going to bring in a more a higher profile rookie running back. They brought in the Ohio State pair in for a top 30 visit. They brought in a couple other running backs, and I think overall they bring in Taj Brooks, right? Who I actually happen to like coming into this class, but
Yeah.
I think Chase Brown still is a pretty big winner. Taj Brooks gets day 3 capital. It wasn't even early day 3 as well. And when you look at this offense for the Bengals, it's perfectly set up for a guy like Chase Brown, right there. I mean, this team made some adjustments, so to speak, when it comes to adding to the defense, I guess. When you
Yeah.
say adjustments, I mean they made some acquisitions, but overall, I'm not really encouraged by it. And I think Chase Brown should be getting pretty much the majority of the pass down work as we saw in this
Yeah.
offense last year. And yeah, I definitely think he's a winner in this process.
Yeah, I mean, they wrap up all the wide receiver drama. Joe Burrow's looking good. The tight end situation is still, you know, they're happy about who they have, but I'm not encouraged from a fantasy standpoint. So as far as just being that kind of, you know, the kind of peak Austin Eckler that we saw in the early 2020s, like that's how I feel about Chase Brown, and just think he's going to be a big boy for your rosters.
Yeah, and to put it in perspective, Joe Burrow had 652 pass attempts last year. That was the most of any quarterback in the NFL. And second was Aaron Rodgers at 584. So he almost had 100 more attempts than the next quarterback. This defense didn't get much better. And they play in a division with, I mean, mid-ish offenses, right? I mean, the Bengals are I mean, the Ravens are good, so they're going to put up some points. The Browns offense,
The
not so
list,
much.
the list stops
Yeah.
with the Ravens pretty much.
Yeah. But I mean, overall, this is a pretty well-known defensive division.
Yeah.
And the Bengals don't find themselves having a good defense. So
Mm.
even those bad offenses end up scoring points, it feels like, against this defense. Some recent trades that, Chase Brown has been involved in as early as today, per Dynasty Daddy, Hollywood Brown and a 2026 second rounder for Chase Brown. That's in a 12-team super flex. I mean, that's a bargain for Chase Brown, I got to think, right?
That's insane. Especially for where we are in this point in the offseason. Maybe, if it's July and he's dealing with some sort of camp injury issue, or they bring in somebody else, but to do that post draft is nuts to me.
Yeah, I think some more realistic ones, right? I saw Zach Moss and Chase Brown as a pair traded
Mm.
for the 106 and the 201 in this year's draft. I think
Oh
that's
yeah.
a little bit more fair.
Yep.
I think I also saw Bucky Irving in a 311 for 2025 traded for Aaron Jones and
Mhm.
Chase Brown. Um, that's an interesting one. I mean, depending on your team, if
Sure.
you could use the veteran in Jones, you might prefer Chase, but I'll still take the Bucky side there. I just like Bucky more longer term. And then
Yep.
the last one, and kind of an interesting one, Chase Brown for Anthony Richardson. What do you think
Oh,
about
okay.
that?
You need to lay off the bottle, whoever's got that trade going on. I get the upside of what Anthony Richardson could be, but there's a shelf life there, and it might be sooner rather than later. And I'm an Anthony Richardson fan if he's on the field playing for a staff that I can get behind, but that's not the case at the moment.
Yeah, I didn't know there were many Anthony Richard fans left. Don't put me in
It's not a
that
lot.
camp. I'd like to see the guy do well, but my confidence level in him is not extremely high. But I'd say
Yeah,
it's a pretty nice bargain,
there's not a lot
for
of us left.
I,
We meet every Tuesday at Olive Garden, and we have to sit in the back behind closed doors.
Yeah, I mean, if you were gonna move Chase Brown for a quarterback, I think I would rather move him if I would rather Geno Smith over Anthony Richardson, and I wouldn't even do Geno
Mhm.
for Chase Brown straight up either. But there's
Mhm.
better veteran quarterbacks if you needed one that badly
Yeah.
that you could probably get away with doing. The next guy here is going to be Brian Robinson, 26 years old, RB 26. He's right now going off the board at the 108 overall. He's up 4 spots since before the NFL draft, and he's going in round 9. Running backs around him: Joe Mixon, Cam Scatterboo, and David Montgomery. Out of those
Mhm.
3 running backs, Chuck, which ones would you prefer Brian Robinson over?
Honestly, none of them. This is kind of like the reverse of the Chase Brown, where it's like, oh, okay, I guess they're doing this again. They were the number one rushing offense last year per EPA, but I think a lot of that is attributed to the scheme and specifically the quarterback, Jaden Daniels, who's just so unbelievably talented. So they're going to do some combination of him and Eckler again. They added 7th round pick Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt in the 7th round. Pretty maligned pick, actually, after doing some research. I wasn't too familiar with him because he only played 1 game last year. He had 15 touches a game, Brian Robinson, last year, which was in that James Cook range, but he actually needs the touchdowns to stay relevant without those high yardage games or any receiving ability, really. So, of all the players we'll do today, risers or fallers, he feels like the one who's already on borrowed time. Even some of our fallers, I would definitely take over him. So, probably one more year. He's 26. He's really just a plotter. He's on a great rushing offense, which is going to boost his value up a little bit. But I would have him as a personal faller, even though I understand why he's rising.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things with the market in general, right? Like, guys are going to rise just off the sheer fact alone that they weren't heavily impacted, right?
Yeah.
From the NFL draft. But overall, when you look at Brian Robinson, he was a guy that I had listed as a guy that I was concerned about. And to your point,
Mm.
this is an offense that runs the football a ton, but
Oh yeah.
for for an offense that runs the football so much, he only had he was ranked 20th in red zone touches. Like, that's concerning for a guy his
Yeah.
size. And when you look at him and you think, okay, likely a volume guy, not a guy that's going to wow you with receptions, right? He had 20 receptions last year. Like you're thinking touchdowns and volume. That's what you need from a
Mhm.
guy like that. And in an offense where the quarterback is going to run in a lot of touchdowns, likely with his legs, it's concerning, right? And then
Yep.
to only be 20th in red zone touches with all those opportunities in the red zone and all those rushing attempts, which again is inflated with Jaden Daniels, it is concerning, right? And he was
Yep.
26th in opportunity share last year. And I think it's encouraging, right, that he didn't get nuked necessarily,
Mm.
but I'm not necessarily buying him. I think
Yep.
you could maybe make the case if we're talking Scattaboo, David Montgomery, or Joe Mixon. You could maybe make the case on Joe Mixon, but
Sure.
how much shelf life does Brian Robinson have? Right. I mean,
Mhm.
like you said, maybe borrowed time. Joe Mixon feels like he's on borrowed time, but at least you're banking on a guy that we've seen provide elite level production. He even provided
Yeah.
elite production last year when he was healthy to begin the year.
Yeah, I mean, Mixon's going to be, in that Chase Brown tier of guys that can be an RB1 this year and can really move markets as far as where you are in your league standings. I just don't think you're getting that with Brian Robinson. They did, they addressed the first round draft pick on a nice offensive lineman. They're making moves for next year, the year after, maybe even the year after that. They're building their line from the inside out. They've got the quarterback, they've got the wide receiver. I like for them to make a move at running back in the next year or two to kind of, okay, we can spend on some luxuries. We can open up the toolbox a little bit, but they're building a foundation right now, and he's just going to be the one who benefits from that in the short term.
Yeah, I'm looking at some recent trades, and I've seen Brian Robinson straight up for the 204.
Hmm.
I think if you think you can get Cam Scattaboo with that 204, which is about where
Hmm.
he's going in that
Yeah.
202 to 204 range. If you think you can get Scattaboo with that 204, I would take that. If I could
Hmm.
flip Brian Robinson for Scattaboo, I would definitely take that.
Yep.
Would you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just
Yeah.
talk about, Scattaboo is, I think, a third round NFL draft talent who went in the fourth because of all these compensatory picks, the deep running back class, all that stuff. Feels like a good move to me.
Yeah, the other thing I've seen Brian Robinson for like the 210. Um, again, you're playing with fire once you get to like
Mm,
the 210 because
yeah.
I would hope to get like Tootin, right? I think Tootin is
Mm,
certainly a risk. Brashal Tootin, who goes to the Jaguars,
mm,
who finds himself in Liam Cohen's offense. But overall, yeah, I think that's something that would kind of be something you'd have to do
yeah,
during the draft and know where the board is falling. But let's
sure.
go ahead and move on to our next player. So the next player on this list is going to be DeAndre Swift. This is an interesting one. 26 years old, RB 30, 117th overall on the board. He's up 15 spots from the beginning of the NFL draft or previous to the NFL draft starting. He's going in the mid 10th round, and he's drafted near Trey Benson, Travis Etienne, and Tony Pollard. What are your thoughts on DeAndre Swift, Chuck?
I mean, the biggest winner of the Ben Johnson sweepstakes, I don't think it's Caleb Williams. I don't think it's DJ Moore. I don't think it's Roma Dunze. Right now, it is DeAndre Swift. And he will be that guy until if this running back room holds until September. And, there's good reason to think it might not. He had top 10 opportunity last year that translated into some pretty horrific stats from an efficiency standpoint. Dead last in rushing yards over expected, 51st in fantasy points per opportunity. Now, you could point to a million reasons why that may be from a team building standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, personnel, what have you. He's clearly just a guy who needs a good offensive line. I know you and I have debated in the past whether or not they have that right now. They definitely are going to have a better one than last year, but is it good enough for this guy to produce, to give him the holes that he had when he was a Philadelphia Eagle, or even when he was with the Lions? That I'm a little bit more skeptical on. They will probably emphasize the passing game a lot more this year. Ben Johnson's time in Detroit, he led the league in screen passes. Uh, that's where you can utilize DeAndre Swift the most. Get him out in space, let him be explosive. How he fits into this very crowded Chicago Bears offense is still going to be a mystery, even with all the talent. DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Luther Burden, Loveland, Komet. I mean, there's a ton of mouths to feed when you have a running back who needs a specific style of offense to be catered to him. So he's in between a riser and a faller for me. If I had him on my team, I'd feel good about this year. I certainly wouldn't be trying to acquire him. And I don't even think I could sell him for anything unless you had some Chicago fans who had been drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I think there are people who truly believe that, that he has survived, right?
Mhm.
There are talks, Nick Chubb and J.K. Dobbins remain the
Yeah.
the most desirable free agents on the market at the running back
Mhm.
position. But when we talk about Swift, right, the Bears can move on from him in 2026 with a
Mhm.
$1.3 million cap hit.
Mhm.
And 12.6 points per game was good enough for RB21 last year with little competition. I think that's what
Yeah.
concerns me the most is with that little of competition, he was RB21 now in points
Mhm.
per game. Now, you could also sit here and say they upgraded the offensive line, they upgraded the offensive coordinator slash head coach. It'll be a better situation.
Mhm.
So you have to assume that if they don't bring in any more competition, which they really didn't, they brought in Manungai
Mhm.
from Rutgers, who I happen to like. But outside of that, I mean, if they don't bring any more competition in, you should assume he should be a solid RB2 with the offense being better. But I wouldn't
Yeah.
hitch my wagon there. He had 47 catches last year. So that definitely keeps his floor alive. But 8 games outside of the RB2,
Mhm.
outside of being an RB2, I think that's concerning as well. But look, you could sway me if I could acquire him cheap and I really was in a situation where I didn't like, for example, the 301 for DeAndre Swift. If I was in a deep league and I did not have good running backs, I'd be willing to take a chance on that. I
Mhm.
would think I would throw out the 301 for DeAndre Swift if I was contending. Would you consider
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah, I'd like to look at upgrading maybe my quarterback, tight end, wide receiver with some of the guys in this draft that are kind of when you get around that range, you start losing those running backs that can really punch up, and you start looking at Arroyo, Fannin Jr., Tyler Shuck. You look at some of these other positions that you might be able to find a starter in. I'm really glad you talked about where he finished, consistently over his career. You take away some of those Eagles games, which, who doesn't produce behind the Eagles? He really has been a career late RB2, early RB3. And that's what you're going to get with him again this year with the emphasis on the passing game. So maybe he's a throw in a trade. Maybe you're trying to, like I said, rebuild another position. But either way, I would trade him for the 3-1.
Yeah, I would take him. I would give up the 301 to get him
Mhm.
if I was a contender and I really needed the help.
Yeah.
Just because look, I mean, third round pick, I mean, rookie picks, they start to have less hit rates as you move on. Honestly, there have been more hits in the third round in the last
Mm.
2 years than prior to that. But
Yeah.
overall, I mean, you're banking on upside with Swift. He's still young, and maybe if you believe in this offense getting better, you're willing to
Mm.
take a chance on him if you don't think they're going to bring somebody else in.
Yeah.
I've seen he's also I saw DeAndre Swift. Jake Ferguson traded for Swift in a second rounder the next year.
Mm.
I would take that too if you thought that second was going to be high and if you could
Yeah.
afford to move Ferguson. Um, there's some other ones around here I'm taking a look at, and I mean, I seen Swift for the 207. I wouldn't give up the
Mm.
207 for Swift. I like a lot of guys in that range. I think
Mhm.
I think the 301 is fair. I don't think I would give up much higher than that to go acquire him.
Yeah.
But overall, definitely a winner. I saw a crazy one here. This one pretty nuts. Swift for Brandon Ayuk in a 12-team start 11 full PPR. Now this is all pulling from
Yeah.
Dynasty from sleeper trades
Yeah.
via Dynasty Daddy, but that's a
Yeah.
that's a little
That's
out there.
That's somebody, and this camp is pretty large. That's somebody who's been burned by Brandon Ayuk in 2 of the
Yeah.
last 4 years here for one reason or another. And that's a large group of people, but you really shouldn't let that drive your decision making that much.
No,
Swift
no.
is going to have,
Certainly yeah.
if he's 25% better this year because of the offensive line and the coaching, you're looking at a guy who's probably like the RB 15 on the year, but is probably closer to like RB 21 in points per game. And that can help you out.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're talking, contender maybe,
Mm.
and I mean, you'd have to be a contender, and you'd have to be in a tough spot.
Yeah.
I personally likely would not be going to try to acquire him, but again,
Mm.
if he can be had for cheap and you need the depth, I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah. He's
Um,
got also one last thing. He just turned 26. He's only got 1,000 touches in his career, some due to injury, some due to splitting time with some other guys. Still got a little bit of runway for maybe where he ends up on another team as maybe, a third down back, maybe a guy who is the RB2 in a committee. So he has a future in the next little span.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. He's always had that issue staying healthy.
Of course.
But next guy that we're going to talk about is a guy that you've been tweeting about a decent amount as of late. It's going to be Najee Harris of
Mm,
the now Los Angeles Chargers,
yep.
27 years old, RB 42, 158 off the board overall. He's
Mm,
actually down 17 spots since before the NFL draft. Round
mm,
14, drafted next to Brashal Tootin, Jalen Warren, and Rashad White.
mm.
Before you get into it, those three guys, who would you take Najee over? Tootin, Warren, Rashad White? Would you take him over all of them, or where do you stand there?
Yeah, I'd take him over Warren and White. I wouldn't take him over Tootin just because I think Tootin has a path to potentially being an RB1 on a team at some point. And
Yeah.
that's, full frontal. I'm down on ETN and Bigsby. So that's not the consensus. That's just how I feel personally. I think Najee can still be an RB1 on a team. He's on a 1-year deal with LA. Who knows how much grindage he'll get in that Greg Roman offense. But you just take one look at Omarion Hampton shaking Jim Harbaugh's hand, and he looks like Myles Garrett. He is so big. And you just look at him and you go, I know exactly why they took this guy. He's going to get 250 touches in his rookie year, which is what we expected for Najee. One of the biggest swift kick in the nuts to anybody in startups who was a Najee stand that took him pre-draft, and this happens every year. There's always a couple guys that you bank on getting that role, and it turns out that teams had something else in mind. I still think he could be a decent handcuff. There's been multiple years where Greg Roman offense's second leading ball carrier had 150 to 175 touches with some vulture potential. So he's not essentially kneecapped in the short term. His ceiling has been dramatically brought down.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. The one benefit is that in a Greg Roman offense and in this offense, we know it's going to be run heavy.
Mm,
Now look, Omarion Hampton is the guy. I mean, they spent first round capital on a
yeah.
running back. It was their first pick overall in the draft, and I mean, they're going to give him every opportunity to be the
Yeah.
lead back unless he severely struggles in camp. But overall, I mean, in this room last year, we saw 463 rushes. If you remove Justin Herbert's, who had 69 carries, if you remove that, you land at about 300 and somewhere around 397, 398, 397, somewhere around there.
Mm,
Outside of that, I mean, you figured Najee's been a guy, Chuck, and you've talked
mm.
about it. This is the guy that's touched the ball the most in the NFL since 2021,
Yep.
and at the running back position, right? He's a guy that has commanded some volume, but we also think Omarion Hampton's going to. But we've seen
Mm,
this room, we've seen them split carries in this room. I think
yeah.
that's the big thing. Kamani Vidal, 43 touches last year. Hassan Haskins, 34, who obviously is a hardball buddy.
Mhm,
Those, let's just wipe those out, and let's just not assume that those guys get any touches. If Omarion Hampton gets somewhere around 200, and Najee gets somewhere around 125, I think that's realistic.
mhm.
For the first year. But how many times, how many catches does Najee get in this offense? I
Yeah.
think is something that I worry about too. Because if he's
Mhm,
not catching the ball, right, which he's good at, and splitting time in a timeshare,
mhm.
that concerns me because Hampton is a really good pass catcher as well.
Yeah. Yeah, year 2 of the Greg Roman offense is traditionally when it pops, and we're gonna know pretty early when that happens. Justin Herbert, 500 attempts last year, down dramatically from his earlier days. I don't know how much more they're gonna throw the ball. I just think they wanna be more effective when they throw it, bringing in Trey Harris to kind of take that secondary spot. So they beef up the line. They bring in Mekhi Becton, who comes in to play guard. So they're gonna have 3 standout players on the line. And then they revamped the other 2 positions as well. So I just think that they want to dominate games. They want to throw guys at you and bulldoze you. And they have 2 backs that can do that. And they want to be able to do that at all times. So I think he'll figure prominently. I'd be interested to know what the trade action has been for him as we get into this post draft.
Yeah, I will tell you that I have attempted to trade Najee.
Mm,
I probably should have traded him before the draft.
mhm,
I missed out on that. I actually tried to trade Najee for Scadaboo straight up,
mhm.
and was denied, which is crazy,
Sure.
but understandable, I guess. A lot of
Mm,
people like myself are pretty high on Scadaboo's landing spot, but I've
mm.
seen Najee go for 203 and a 405 for Najee
Yep.
straight. I saw Hollywood here and Najee for a 206.
Mm,
I think you're likely getting somewhere around a 206 for Najee at this point is
mhm.
where his value is, unless you find an owner that's pretty high on him. Would you say that's about right?
Yeah, I think so because you're looking at guys at 206 that might take a year or two to develop or at least clear the running back or wide receiver room out, depending on who you get, versus Najee, who could very easily be the RB1 on a team next year. Who's to say the Commanders don't look at Najee Harris in free agency next year and say, let's do a 2-year, $15 million deal. Let's bring in a guy that can bolster a running back room, or any number of other teams that are going to be in a similar situation. So there's multiple different avenues you can explore, whether you have the 206, whether you have Najee, or even in that range.
You know, this is an interesting one here. Chase
Mm,
Brown for Najee, George Pickens, and a 203.
mm.
Would you take the package there or would you take Chase Brown?
I'd probably take the package there because I really like the turn. You know, you could be looking at a Matthew Golden, you could be looking at a Luther Burden, you could be looking at some of these other running backs. I mean, I was in a draft today where Caleb Johnson fell to that 203. That's not common, but it certainly is possible. Quarterback, tight end, whatever you want to take there. I think you're looking at a nice foundational rebuilding piece. Pickens, who knows? He could be a Cowboy before this episode's get posted. Who was the other one in there?
It was a 203 Najee and Pickens for
And
Chase
Najee.
Brown.
That's right, of course, the guy we're talking about right now. Yeah, you know what? That's enticing. I think I would probably consider that.
Yeah, I think I would if I'm moving Brown, I would like a premium pick in the draft. Unless you really
Mm,
need if you need depth, I
mm,
guess. But team people have to understand, do they really need depth, right?
yeah.
Because in this situation, Chase Brown's valued at somewhere around a 106, about a
Mm,
106, 105 in the rookie drafts. You're looking at guys like Trevion Henderson, right? Or, some wide receivers. Tet has fell to the 105 in a bunch of drafts I've been in so far, right?
sure.
Would you prefer Chase Brown? Would you prefer Chase Brown trading him for Tet, or would you prefer the
Mm,
package here? I think the package is enticing if you believe in George Pickens, if you believe in
mm,
your ability to draft and you're comfortable with what's available at the 203 and getting Najee added on top, sure.
yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I sometimes I like the packages, but not when it's a guy that I can get a top 6 pick for in a rookie draft that, I happen to like those guys in that top 6. So I think I'd probably lean Brown unless you really need depth. Then I think the package is fine because, like you said, if you can if I've seen Matthew Golden slip to the 203 as well.
Yeah.
You could get Golden, George Pickens, and Najee, and I'd be okay with that
Yeah.
depending on your team.
So the issue I take with that, and I think managers would back me up here, is that I think you would have to be high as a damn kite to trade anything from the 105 to like the 107 for Chase Brown, unless it's in some package deal. So I know maybe his short-term value reflects that, but I mean, I think we're all there's a 3-year window you're trying to play to win dynasty leagues or at least build out your dynasty roster. And that's where it's kind of like people get in arguments all the time over here's what the trade calculator says, here's what the rankings say versus you can miss me with that.
Well, I'll tell you this.
Mm,
When when you're on the clock, that's what matters. People can tweet, people can say, we
sure.
can talk here, but when you're on the clock, that's what really matters. And right
Mm,
now, for startup ADP at the moment, Dynasty Data Lab has it pulled, and you have Trevion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins get drafted before Chase Brown. Judkins
yeah.
is valued at the 106, so he's about right there at the 106. So,
Yeah.
but it also depends. I mean, sometimes when you're, it's going to depend on who the owner is, but the
Mm,
data is showing that right now people are valuing the 106 right there with Chase Brown, and then valuing Chase
mhm,
Brown over the 107, which would be Tyler
mhm.
Warren in this data,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is startup ADP. But
Sure.
again, it's always going to depend on league, and
Mm,
honestly, you always, in my opinion, a lot of times if you want a guy, you're gonna have to pay
Mm.
above market price for them,
Of course,
right?
that's the stronghold that we always put on guys. I will ask the chat right now. I want to hear how you guys feel about all these trades, but specifically this one, I would love to know how you feel about Chase Brown in that 106 versus 106, 107, 108 range.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'd like to hear that as well.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, let's move on to DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears, 28 years old, wide receiver, 28, 73rd overall. He's down 6 spots from before the NFL draft started.
mm,
He's going in the 7th round, drafted near Chris Olave, DK Metcalf, and Matthew Golden.
mhm.
Chuck, what are your thoughts on DJ Moore and how he came out of this draft?
This is just insane when you think about what he was doing in 2023 with Justin Fields versus where this offense has gone, all the different things that have happened. Multiple Bears on this list does feel appropriate as they had one of the most frustrating drafts out there. If you own any of these pieces, if you're looking at it from like a top-down Bear standpoint, you might like the direction the team's going, but they take Luther Burden in the 2nd round, a guy who profiled as a more explosive but less polished DJ Moore. So it's kind of like shades of Ibuka going to the Buccaneers with Chris Godwin, only to a lesser extent. I think the consensus will probably end up being that he's the odd man out long term, even though he just signed a 4-year, $110 million deal. But in today's NFL, you can get traded with a deal like that in the blink of an eye. It happens every year, sometimes multiple times a year. So we thought he'd be the top dog with Caleb, which he was, but he had more targets in 2024 than he did in 2023, but 400 less yards, which is remarkable when you think about the passing of Justin Fields versus the passing of Caleb Williams. So it might have just been a competition thing. Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze, they did command targets. And you can certainly bet that some combination of Loveland and Burden are also going to command targets. So I don't know how the pieces fit on the board yet with Ben Johnson, but I trust where they're going. So whatever move they make is probably going to be the right one.
Yeah, so I actually had looked into this yesterday. DJ
Mm.
Moore's cap hit if they were to move on from him before week 1 of this year, because there have been some big names in the space that feel there is a strong possibility that he could be moved. Now,
Yeah.
I looked at it. If he's cut, which I don't think they would ever do that,
No.
$60 million cap hit if it's pre 6-1. If it's pre
Yeah.
6-1 trade, it's a $16 million cap hit, dead cap hit, which is a little bit more palatable depending on
Mm-hmm.
what they get back, and you'd have to find a trade partner that would be willing to obviously do that. And the Bears, their cap situation, they can probably afford it. Post 6-1 cut, 48 million in dead cap in 2025,
Mm-hmm.
12 million in dead cap in 2026. So they would need to make this move in the next month, or else
Yeah.
they're eating a ton of dead cap. Post 6-1 trade, 4 million in dead cap this year, but 12 million in dead cap the next year.
Mm-hmm.
I think, there have been concerns. Ben Johnson and them have came out and talked about guys' effort. And it seems like it was probably a shot at DJ Moore. What I would say
Mm-hmm.
about DJ Moore is, outside of him throwing his helmet in Carolina to possibly cost them that win,
Yes.
they were playing the Falcons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really recall DJ Moore really having like issues with
No.
effort and
No.
character concerns. I mean, have you?
No, this is no, and absolutely not. And this is the guy who's had a frustrating career as a wide receiver. We think he
Yeah.
finally gets saved from wide receiver purgatory in Carolina, comes to Chicago, has a career season, and then they move on from his quarterback. Now, look, they should have moved on from his quarterback, but the team regressed overall. He had a really frustrating year, and there's just a lot of reasons to be upset in general, but the team made all the corrective decisions. I don't like that they came out and implied any of that stuff. I don't think we're going to see Ryan Poles as general manager for much longer. This team had a lot of issues, but I think the draft picks that they made in the first 2 rounds are they're going to be really tempting for whoever they're going to be bringing in as the general manager next, because there's going to be some pieces to work with. But this isn't exactly foundational team building exercises they're going through.
So when you look at DJ Moore, I would buy him right now. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know, like, so looking at some of the recent trades, right? I'm seeing I'm seeing DJ Moore for Rashad White in a 203. I would take that. I mean,
Yeah.
you're looking at 203. Maybe you get Matthew Golden if you're that high on him. And I'm gonna take DJ Moore, who has been the consistent guy. I mean, this
Yeah.
is a dude that averages around 125 to 130 targets a
Yep.
season, and even last year, I mean, he finds himself with another year where he has 140 targets. That's with Keenan Allen, who had 121. This is a guy that plays a ton of games. He's never really hurt. And Roma Junzo had 101 targets last year. They had 3 wide receivers with 100 targets. He gets the best coordinator of his career, and gets to get a continuity with his quarterback in year 2, on top of the fact that they're in a division that's a high-powered offensive division. You have the Packers, you have the
Yep.
Vikings, right? And then you have the Lions, right? Which may take a step back this year. And that will be remain. It will be interesting to see.
Sure.
You could maybe say the Vikings take a step back because they lost Sam Darnold, and I believe in JJ. But
Yeah.
overall, I'd be buying DJ Moore at this price because you know what? If they move DJ Moore, we have seen Chuck him be productive with
Yep.
every quarterback he's ever had. I mean, he's at least drawn a very large target share with
Yeah.
every quarterback that he's ever had.
Yeah, he is, especially given his age and his production in the past, he's a prime target for that Stephon Diggs, like traded at 27, 28, has 3 or 4 more years on a team that needs a high quality passing weapon. And if somebody's going to take on that contract, which I think plenty of teams would be willing to do, that is a gesture towards this is a feature part of our passing attack. DeAndre Hopkins traded at a similar age. The door is never slammed shut on guys that have this kind of talent. He's not an elite wide receiver. He's probably not even the tier beneath, but he is certainly in that third group, and he's going to be valuable for somebody.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing. I will be looking after this show to send some offers out for DJ Moore, just looking
Yeah.
at what he's being moved for. I mean, I'm seeing DJ Moore for the a 2025 210 and a 2026 round 2 seconds for him, and one of them is a late second. I'll take that all day. I'm seeing, I mean, DJ Moore for the 112 is a little bit more spicy.
Yeah.
It would be team dependent, right? If I was going
Sure.
to make a move like that. But I mean, overall, I think DJ Moore is a good buy, and it's going to be team dependent and league dependent.
Yeah.
Some people are hot on him, some people are cold on him, right? But I think he's a buy, and again, even if he gets traded somewhere else, I'm comfortable taking the risk of wherever he lands because he's dominated target shares wherever he's gone.
Yeah, this is where opportunities lie. And I mean, if a year from now we're looking at, I just talked about Stephon Diggs. What if the Patriots were to acquire DJ Moore next year and pair him with a Drake May? And I could give you 10 examples of a team with a good quarterback that's lacking high-end wide receiver weapons that could do something like that. And he is in the prime age.
Yeah. Let's close out here and let's move on to our final player, and it's going to be Tyrone Tracy, who was a guy that we talked about a few weeks back. And what we thought was going to happen, Chuck, kind of happened with Tyrone Tracy. It didn't happen with every guy, right? I mean, it didn't happen with every guy. I thought Chase Brown was going to get more competition. He didn't. I thought Brian Robinson was going to get more competition. He didn't. But Tyrone Tracy, 25 years old, RB 28, 115th overall. He's down 5 spots since the NFL draft before it. And mid 10th round pick right now, drafted near Isaiah Pacheco, Tajay Spears, and Zach Charbonnet. Now, Isaiah Pacheco doesn't get much competition outside of Rashard Smith, who I happen to like.
Yep.
Tajay Spears gets Trevor Etienne in his room, and Zach Charbonnet gets Damian Martinez. Would you take any of those guys ahead of Tyrone Tracy?
For ahead of Tyrone Tracy, probably not. I could wink and maybe get a shot or two in me, and Charbonnet I could see as far as maybe having a better career and maybe having some, value in the next 2 to 4 years, but still love Kenneth Walker there. They went Moneyball in this one. In Moneyball, when they're like, people are trying to replace Saquon. We can't, but we can recreate him in the aggregate. That's what the Giants are doing with Tyrone Tracy and Cam Scatterboo. And look, I thought they might have gone earlier on this. I thought with Saquon going to the Eagles and blowing up, they would have maybe made running back a priority. They addressed a lot of other needs in the offseason. They addressed the offensive line. They addressed the defensive line. They addressed the cornerback room. They're not great, but they invested in them. So we bring in Cam Scatterboo, a guy who, like I talked about, I'm a little higher on him than most, but he's a physical, bruising, I want to make you hate football kind of runner. That actually pairs well with Tracy, who is a scat back. He can get out in space. He's explosive. He's a great receiving back. I think they're going to be in a running back committee. I don't think this is a death sentence on him. It just lowers his value from that, RB24, which I believe he was going into the draft 2 years ago or 3 years ago, sorry, 2022. When the Giants were humming, they were second in the NFL in rushing EPA. Now, granted, they had Saquon Barkley, but they were still able to piecemeal production with a decent offensive line and an offense that was not pitiful. Hopefully they can be that again, bringing in Dart. There's going to be a ton of pressure on the staff to be good immediately, because if Jackson Dart in this offense is anything but pretty nice this year, the whole regime is going to be gone.
Yeah, I'm so glad I don't own Tracy.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm
Yeah.
extremely high on Scatterboo. I almost had Scatterboo ahead of Caleb Johnson, and people call me crazy about it, and maybe that feels like a hot take, and I'm sure it is a hot take. But
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at Cam Scat, let's just take a look at the Giants' offense last year. 30th in EPA per rush, 31st in success rate when it comes to rush success rate, 26th in explosive run rate. Cam Scatterboo can be a workhorse in this offense. He had a 40% college dominator rating in college. Tracy, converted wide receiver. He can be valuable in the pass game, but when you look at Scatterboo, he's a better receiver. This guy caught 45 passes in 2024. Tyrone Tracy had issues as a pass protector. If Cam Scatterboo comes to the team and is day one a better pass protector than Tracy, that's going to be extremely detrimental to Tyrone Tracy, who wasn't a good pass catcher last year. It's notable that he was ranked 47th in pass pro in 2024. I think Scatterboo fits this offense really well. I think Tyrone Tracy has a fumbling issue, and this team knows it. And they have a toughness issue. This team has a toughness issue. Like, they got pushed around last year. Like, Scatterboo is going to come in and he's going to, it's kind of like Tyler Booker said for the Cowboys, right? Like, he's going to take the love out of football for people. Like, Scatterboo can do that. Tyrone Tracy was a 5th-round rookie. Like, if you drafted him last year, you profited. If you traded him, you profited, right? Now you're sitting here and you say, all right, well, he's not dead, but I just think that Scatterboo's the guy to own. I mean, Tracy had just 4 goal line touches last year, just 4. And I get it.
I'm surprised I'm surprised they got to the goal line 4 times, to be honest.
I think that'll be the rebuttal, right? But like, overall, he averaged 10.6 points per game. That was good enough for RB31. And again, the fumbling is a concern, right? Like, down the stretch last year with the fumbles, we started to see them kind of take away from his workload. Overall, the last thing I will mention about this is, you mentioned the quarterback situation. I will say they had some issues at quarterback, and so maybe some people will say that those statistics are a little bit skewed when it comes to success rate, because defenses were, kind of keying in on the run because they couldn't throw. They have Jameis Winston, they have Russell Wilson, they have Jackson Dart. These are not world beaters, but they're guys that can effectively run an offense. And so even if one of them goes down, like we saw last year with Daniel Jones, their contingency plan should be better. It's kind of like when we looked at Breece Hall, right? And when Aaron Rodgers went down, like, everyone was concerned. They had no contingency plan. Look at Tua Tagovailoa. They had no contingency plan last year, and A-Chain's value suffered from it when Tua wasn't playing, right? At least we know that they have a capable backup. Whoever it ends up being the starter, some guys behind him, they're going to have somebody that can man the ship if something happens.
Yeah, I think, to talk about a guy we talked about a little bit earlier, Najee Harris, this is probably going to be like a broke ass version of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, where Jaylen Warren he's got a little bit more speed to him. He can do a little bit more in space, but he struggles in the run game compared to Najee Harris, who can just grind away yards, which is a little bit more of the Cam Scatterboo-esque, mold. It's really going to come down to how this offensive line lets either one of these guys work.
So let me ask you, and we'll close out on this question. Najee Harris or Tyrone Tracy in Dynasty, which guy do you prefer? If you could get Najee for Tracy, would you do it straight up?
Yeah, I probably would because I think he's got more upside, probably this year and probably the next few years, as opposed to Tracy, who, not just Scadaboo that's going to limit him, but that's always going to be somebody that's going to limit him, I think.
Yeah, I think the benefit for Najee is he's on a 1-year deal where he could find himself going to a better running back room situation and not paired up
Mm.
with a first round pick in Hampton.
Yeah.
But that's going to do it for us, Chuck. We'll see you guys next week, and make sure you like the show.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.